Hiya and welcome. My name is Lauren and I'm the Communications and Partnerships Coordinator for Carbon Positive Australia. Today, I will be hosting our event alongside our speakers. Before I make introductions, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land of which we meet today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and the land from where we are all gathering from. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. We wanted to host a webinar to give information on the common questions we received and the sustainability topics that were of primary concern in our last business survey. We hope you will leave ready with something you can take to your workplace. This morning, you will hear from Catherine Patterson, Head of Partnerships for Carbon Positive Australia, on industry movements and how your customers' sustainability goals may have implications for you, and how to tackle your carbon footprint. Our guest speaker, Lacey Webb, will talk about understanding waste and how you can manage this to reduce your impact. We will run a quick fire round with our guests, and there will be time permitted at the end for audience questions. We also have a special guest this morning, May Wang from Somersault Markets, Perth's award-winning markets, joining us for our panel. Before we begin, here's some quick housekeeping. Questions will be available to ask via chat, and we will run a Q&A with these at the end of the session. Any questions that we don't get time to answer, we will email to you. So to begin, here is Catherine Patterson.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me. I'm Head of Partnerships here at Carbon Positive Australia. I was super excited when I saw so many people were interested in this topic. I'm absolutely delighted to talk to you about it all. I'd like to kick off by acknowledging I'm also coming from Whadjuk Noongar land. Right, so I have a lot to get through, so I'm going to get straight into it. Just confirming everyone can see my screen. Yeah, looking great. Okay. So sustainability has a broad remit. It's how your organization and business operate in the broader environment, both economically, socially, environmentally, and through corporate governance. Sustainability looks different for every organization, business and person. No one shoe fits all. It has to fit with your industry, your business, and your people. When you develop a sustainability plan for your business, it has to be both sustainable and authentic. You need to establish priorities, and these priorities have to be relevant to your business. The priorities could be based around areas that you might feel you have a weakness. For instance, you might have poor policies, areas where you feel you could have the greatest impact. For instance, you could be a coffee roaster and you want to source sustainable coffee beans. It could be areas that are important to your staff and customers. For instance, your business might be involved in construction, so health and well-being outcomes of spaces that you're creating could be a more relevant focus for your business. Environmental, social and governance, or ESG reporting, aims to set the environmental intention and then measure and report on this. ESG reporting is currently voluntary. Environmental statements and reports are at the design and decision of a company. However, there are changes coming. Compulsory standardized reporting is on its way for climate action and risk. Here in Australia, climate-related risk disclosure will become a requirement for ASX-listed companies. Internationally, international accounting standards have amalgamated a number of frameworks to move to a standardized environmental risk reporting for investors. I'm mentioning this because it might not be totally relevant to your organization, but it will ultimately lead to more robust reporting demands, both upstream and downstream, to suppliers and distributors. So if you're not thinking about it now, it's a good time to start thinking about your environmental policies. In the case of climate change, as we start to operate within a changing climate, understanding your environmental factors is really important. There are risks, but there are also lots of opportunities. Increased efficiencies can result in cost savings and resilience to changing conditions. Engaging staff in environmental and social action can help create community within your workplace. Your business can help save the world. Yes, really. We often think about climate action or sustainability as being reductionist, but really you're adapting to a changing world and looking to the future, which can also be positive. So, where to start? As we've discussed briefly, sustainability can look different for every organisation. But reducing your ecological footprint is a really great starting point. In business, we often talk about net zero or carbon neutrality when we talk about ecological footprints. At the moment, being net zero or carbon neutral is completely optional for organisations. It is up to you how far you want to go. Here in Australia, the only carbon neutral certifying body is the part government run Climate Active. The UN science-based targets on net zero are the only international standard that we should be using if we're looking to keep emissions or keep our temperature within 1.5 degrees. I just want to say here, you can be actively reducing your ecological footprint and moving towards net zero without being certified carbon neutral. They're not the same. So I thought at this point, it might be good to give some definitions. Net zero and carbon neutral are not entirely the same concept. Both are a state of net zero emissions and both have a need for measurement. You need to understand what your current ecological footprint is and how it's tracking. Net zero is an aspirational goal with a plan and a strategy to get there. Your business is working towards absolute greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Once you become net zero, it should be a permanent state of operations. Whereas carbon neutrality only applies to a specific period of time. The carbon neutral cycle measures emissions from activities in a previous period. Then you look at reduction strategies, and then you look at offsetting the remaining amounts that you can't reduce any further. The process is repeated because we can, as you keep producing emissions, you need to keep going through the cycle of measuring, reducing, and then offsetting. In some cases, carbon neutrality has meant organisations have not actually reduced. They've achieved carbon neutrality through offsets only. So what is offsetting? Offsetting is where you're paying for reductions elsewhere in the economy to compensate for the emissions that you are creating. Offset projects are either derived from activities that either prevent, reduce, or remove emissions. Currently, nature-based solutions, including tree planting, are the only method we have to reduce emissions already in the atmosphere. We sometimes forget that even if we stopped emissions today, we already have to deal with what's there. Greenhouse gas reducing projects can either be verified or unverified. Verified means they've gone through an audit process with a verifying party. I just wanted to say that great nature-based projects can happen outside of verified offset projects. At the moment, measurement is only driven by units of carbon. It does not factor in wider environmental or social benefits. If there's not an established carbon methodology, a project cannot be a verified carbon project. We often see this happening with emerging technologies such as blue carbon. At the moment, blue carbon, it hasn't fully established a measurement process on it, but there's still some amazing projects coming up in that area. Engaging in these activities directly or indirectly through carbon offsetting will offset your ecological footprint of your company and will form part of your reduction or net zero plan. So carbon measurement is fundamental on getting started in any environmental action plan. So now we're going to take a quick look at a carbon calculation. Okay. So carbon calculation is based, it's not a forecast, it's based on activities that have already been completed. So it's based on historical data. You need to collect the data before you start doing a carbon footprint. So information that you might want to start collecting would be your consumption of energy, like your electricity bills, your water consumption, the amount of kilometers that you're traveling, the amount of kilometers that you have to freight details, your air tickets for your business. All this information is needed for your carbon calculation. I'm now gonna hopefully switch my screen so you can take a look at our Excel based calculator. So sorry, just bear with me. So here we have our Excel based calculator. It has a number of tabs that of activities that create greenhouse gas emissions. So greenhouse gas emissions at the moment, here the Australian government publish our emissions factors. These are updated annually, so they change year on year. The reason things that can affect emission factors going up and down can be changes in infrastructure. So for instance, here in Australia, if we were to process more waste onshore more effectively, it would reduce the overall emission factors for waste when you're doing a carbon calculator. Carbon calculations are done on any activity that generates greenhouse gas emissions. So here in our calculator, we have a number of activities that create greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got electricity, air travel, fleet emissions, staff commuting, accommodation, water, waste, food and drinks. You do not have to pick everything on the carbon calculator. You only pick what's relevant to your business. And by relevant, I mean what you want to start measuring and what you can start measuring. Okay, I'm going to run through a couple of examples that might be relevant. So if your business is involved in catering, you might know that food waste is one of your biggest areas of emissions. So measuring and reducing waste is one of your first calls of action. So we know that if you measured your waste, you can see that each ton of, a bin, I've used 240 litres because that's an average bin size, creates 10 tonnes of emissions. So therefore, you know that every bin load of waste, food waste that you can start reducing, you've saved over 10 tonnes of emissions going into the atmosphere. So that's pretty powerful. If you are a consultancy business, one of your biggest emission areas could be travel to your appointments. So you might do a lot of air travel. Whereas you're not producing a lot of waste. And so you know that every flight that you can stop taking will reduce your emissions by at least 1 tonne. So, you know, you could make a commitment saying, right, we're going to work on that we're only going to fly, we're going to reduce our flights by half. I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that carbon calculation does not have to be perfect. It has to be effective. it also takes time to develop. So I think the most important thing here is to start doing it and then see where it takes you. It's coming to the end of my section, so I just wanted to wrap up by saying, for those of you that might be interested in learning more about this topic, we will be launching an online course next week that will talk about sustainability and carbon footprints. We also can help you with your carbon footprints by just contacting us. And we can also help you with nature-based solutions, because obviously that's what we're involved in, projects, nature-based projects that help reduce emissions. I would now like to hand you over to Lacey Webb from the Resources Hub. Resources Hub provide business and administrative processes within the waste sector. Lacey has been in this industry for 15 years. She is a real wealth of knowledge and an amazing speaker, actually. She gives heaps of practical advice. So I'd like to hand you over and enjoy her segment.
Thank you, Catherine. You can tell that my information's outdated, can't you? I realised that I think it's this year I hit 20 years in the waste management industry, which just is making me feel old, frankly. Thanks so much for actually going through that. What's really interesting is I spend an awful lot of time measuring waste management transactional movements, and from a perspective of carbon, my waste footprint I'm okay with, but I've never actually gotten to the point of measuring through our mileage, the transport that we do, because we travel all across Australia. I was only in Perth 2 weeks ago, so I feel like there's an exercise that I should be getting the team to give me a hand to go through with next week. But by the same token, I'm going to give you some bin weight averages for your regions in WA, because I noticed that bin weight average was a little high for a 240 litre bin. I might share, will I share my screen if everyone's okay with that? Let me find my share button. I'm having one of those moments today. Okay, we'll go with that one. We want that one. And we'll hopefully press the present button and it will present. Can someone nod their head and tell me that I'm in presenter mode? Excellent. Okay. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me along. So I'm Lacey Webb from Resource Hub. As Catherine said, we provide boring administrative services to the traditional side of the waste management industry. That includes landfills, transfer stations, the big material recycling facilities. And when I say boring admin stuff, we focus very heavily on data. So that's the transactional data that moves through the facilities. I'm also lucky enough to be the Vice President of the Queensland branch of the Waste Management Association, and I'm coming to you from me and Jen from Brisbane today. A little bit briefly about not me, about us, I suppose. So this is actually Resource Hub. So we're a team currently of all women, but we are hoping to have a bloke in the mix very soon. Very excited about that. We're actually a company focused on flexibility and flexible workforces. And as I imagine many of you can guess, when you say flexibility in the workforce, a lot of mums and women put their hands up. So our team is 11, although we're 5.5 full-time equivalent, and we're rapidly expanding in the sector to, I suppose, help to improve and support the traditional side of waste management. And you can see here a few of the team members catching up with Cost of the Garden. I'm a scrap boy at the Coffs Harbour Waste Conference last week. I thought I'd throw that photo in there. We work with a lot of council and local government facilities. So they are our bread and butter. And that's to help them to understand their regulatory obligations, but also to really dive into that data. And especially in regional Australia, to help them with a little bit more of a hand when they're potentially under-resourced. We also, however, work with a lot of the larger commercial facilities, as well as some of the programs that you'd know from your region. So we do work with the operator of the container exchange schemes in Queensland and in Western Australia. In Queensland, we've been lucky enough to audit the program. We also do work with some commercial entities. So we support Outlook Australia, who are a not-for-profit providing supported workforce into waste management facilities. We work with Rotary on programs such as a battery exchange program so that they can seek revenue to improve their services, as well as working with corporates like the Source Bulk Foods. We're hoping to do some work shortly with Burger Urge. So helping them to understand how the traditional sector works and why they sometimes find gaps when they really are leaning into their sustainability messages or maybe zero waste messages, but they're finding a little bit of a disconnect. And apologies for the voice as well, guys. Usually I'm not quite so squeaky, but I think everybody's catching something lately and my voice has just disappeared. So aside from the people that we work with on a day-to-day, we really like to support organisations that I suppose are finding ways to do better. One of the organisations we work with, Atlas Soils in Townsville, is a group of dads who got together. They identified there was a problem with getting rid of coffee grounds and banana peels at cafes, and they've turned that into a product that they now have available for sale in Mitre 10 to solve growing grass in your front lawn in North Queensland. So, they're the sorts of organisations that we love to be able to work with, as well as local government and large facilities, I suppose, to keep a touch point on that side of waste management that isn't a traditional dirty side. And I don't know if you can see, there's even an excavator sitting on, I think, the cupboard behind me. So we're here to talk about sustainability and climate. I am not a climate specialist, but I am a waste specialist. But I say I'm a war specialist because in our industry, we like to talk about waste and resource recovery. So this is an image that I think a lot of people would expect when they think about waste. Now, I have to say, this is a very neat and tidy landfill, but it is a landfill nonetheless. And I do think there's a place for landfill, a reducing place, but there are things that we currently don't have mechanisms that we can manage. Asbestos, the only thing you can do with it is stick it in a hole in the ground. So waste, this might be a representation of what you think of when you think of waste or resource recovery. This might be something you think of when you think of waste and resource recovery. We see lots of messages out in the media. We all will have watched at some point Craig Rucastle at the War on Waste. It's a few years old now. But there's a lot of language out there about how many tonnes go to landfill and how much food waste we generate every year and how many plastic bottles we generate. But what's really interesting, I think, in the sector is the disconnect that sometimes exists between substantive information and sound bites. And that's why I was really keen to be a part of today's conversation, because I think measurement and accurate measurement is so important. Nothing needs to be perfect, but having a methodology that supports the numbers that we talk about is great. Ideally, we don't want to share messages that are intended to terrify the world about thousands of tonnes going to landfill, when there may also be a much larger proportion of waste, hopefully, being recycled. This third slide is, I suppose, the side of waste that I see. So sure, there's landfill, sure, there's lots of messaging, but these images are some examples, I suppose, of the changing face of the waste and resource recovery sector. The top left-hand image, I'm not sure if my mouse will show on the screen, but we'll try it. The top left-hand image with the conveyors is the latest and greatest recycling facility, or we call it a MRF, a materials recycling facility, in Adelaide. It's about an hour south of Adelaide in the city of Onkaparinga. So this is operated by a group of councils. There's, I think, 5 councils have come together, and they're recycling everything you'd expect to find in your yellow bin and getting really great outcomes. This is a side of the industry at the moment that's getting a lot of investment in ensuring that we've got the capacity to separate out the cardboards, the plastic, the glass, and all of those materials where we don't have contamination that we can potentially generate into new markets or into new products. The bottom image is one that I hope most of you have seen or seen something similar. This is a containers for exchange depot in Aspley in North Brisbane. So container refund points or container deposit schemes are popping up all over Australia, which is wonderful because it's really encouraging community to find avenues to not only recycle content, but to be excited and to have a reason to recycle content. Because I think if you're on this call, you probably know that behaviour change is a particular problem across a number of sectors, but especially in the sustainability space. So I love that we're seeing more containers investment across the country. On the bottom right-hand corner, this lovely giant robot-looking thing. So this is actually a new solar panel recycling facility that's popped up. There's one in regional Victoria and one in regional Queensland. So again, this is another example of the types of investment in the waste and resource recovery sector that we're starting to see. We're seeing that change where the money is starting to get to the places that it needs to go to, you know, finding solutions for problem wastes, solar panels, e-waste, fire extinguishers, all of those things that we just take for granted. Something happens to them. But historically, with all of the new panels coming to Australia, panel waste, we take the frame off, the metal, recycle it, everything else goes into landfill. Programs like this are opening up opportunities for us to remove the cadmium and the silica and all of those nasties from needing to go to landfill. We're giving them another place, and we're getting the glass out of the hole in the ground as well, because, you know, glass is a highly recyclable and valuable material. And then at the very top on this slide, we've got some photos from an office fit out that was managed by Circonomy, previously known as World's Biggest Garage Sale. They're in Sydney and in Brisbane, and they're a program that has direct relationships and contracts with Officeworks, with RM Williams, with a range of other big brands. Interestingly, their latest announcement was that they've got an arrangement with Love Honey, where they're taking end-of-life product and reselling it and circulating it to a retail market, so that they can either sell those items as they are, or they can refurbish them and turn them into new equipment for office fit outs, for chair coverings. They've had a program with Trademut to turn their old fabric into some awesome chairs. And they're really focused on the circular economy principles. So, you know, they have, their ethos is repair, recycle, reuse. This is the waste industry that I work in now, which is very different to this industry that I started in 20 years ago, when it was a bunch of blokes and me hanging out in some trucks and, you know, taking your stuff to the tip. It certainly is a changing face. So the challenge we have, though, I suppose, in the waste and resource recovery sector is that there is a bit of a disconnect. And I like being part of conversations that come from a circular economy approach or come from a commercial business approach that isn't waste, to help people to understand why that disconnect exists. I had a conversation with someone recently and about an event management program that they were doing. And they rang me because they said, hey, I've got, their words, I've got a disconnect. I'm speaking to a council. Over here, one team saying to me, our events, we're going to have 7 different bins. We're going to separate everything out. It's going to be amazing. We've got people rummaging through the bins. We're educating. We're giving returnable plates. Yay. Then on the other side of council, I've got people saying, yeah, but it all goes to one big hole in the ground. We don't have those capacity to deal with those things when it gets to the facility. We have one site with a big bin. So what we're seeing, and I imagine what people on this call will sometimes see, especially in small business, when you look and you think, well, I'm hearing all about soft plastics recycling, but where's my soft plastic bin and what's happening to my stuff? We still have a bit of a disconnect, whether it comes from the region that we're in, perhaps doesn't have the infrastructure that we need to support broader programs. Limited investment. We're getting investment in the big end of infrastructure, but sometimes, depending on where you are and what the material is, we don't need big infrastructure. We just need smaller separation, but we don't have the investment from state or local government in those programs. So we can separate all we like, but at the end of the facility may not have capacity to actually take our waste and keep it separated. So they're having to mingle it again. Additionally, we also have, I suppose, a lot of population density in 6 key areas across the country, but we have a really big country. So, you know, in regional areas, the disconnect of transport and the cost and the commerciality is sometimes too hard to overcome. So while ideally, I'd love to see all cardboard in Australia gathered together and transported to a single location so it can be reproduced to make banana boxes that go back into Coles and Woolies, the reality is that the cost of doing that and transporting it back up to North Queensland to a banana farm or back down to South Australia to pack oysters into is sometimes not realistic. And that's unfortunately a challenge that we're still having to work through. Hopefully, federal government actually has a new program and a new environment minister, and hopefully we'll start to see some more investment in that space to bridge those gaps. But I suppose it's good context to give everybody a call that when you look at something, you think, but why aren't I seeing it in my region? Or why do they talk about that in the east but not back west, or vice versa? These are the challenges. Those disconnects exist. So your business, what are the things you can do? Number one, stick in some bins. You know, you can buy awesome, exciting, yes, I know I'm going lowbrow. However, start with the basics. Stick in some great bins. Stick in some education on those bins. You know, the bins that we've got in this picture are a great product that you can get online. They came with their own yellow, red, and white flyers. However, make your own. Get on Canva. Every region will accept different waste in their yellow bin, as an example, based on the recycling facility it goes to. Interestingly, you know, if you're in Perth, your Murph at South Gifford will absolutely take pizza on your pizza box. But if you're down in, say, Melbourne, there's Murph down there that's not going to want it. They want you to rip that lid off. They don't want any grease. They want fully clean cardboard. So, you know what your facility does and doesn't accept. You can get that information often from your council website and rejig your signage. Help to educate the people who come into your business. You can also move to purchase products that actually are reducing packaging, because consumption is one of the biggest challenges we have in the waste space. We love to buy stuff in plastic. I say that we don't. I don't think anybody loves it, but sometimes it's our only option. So move towards those brands or those businesses where you can buy in bulk, or where you can simply, even at your supermarket, buy in your own fruit bags. Find ways to move away from the consumption that doesn't need to happen, because that reduces the waste that's generated, which reduces the waste that we have to find a home for. And remember, that's what we're doing. We're finding a home for it, whether that home is a recycling stream, whether it is a hole in the ground, whether it is another program that's going to turn it into a new manufactured product. It's about finding a home. Try looking at other education options for your business as well. When we talk about waste and waste reduction in business, there are some great programs like this one. I know Donut Waste do some great programs. I think they're actually on the call today. And there are loads of people looking at great ways to reduce waste and consumption in small business. Touch base with those people, see what great initiatives they've got, and support those initiatives. But once you've moved away from those basics, from those easy wins that you can tick off, consider putting in place a new waste strategy for your organisation. Now, a waste strategy can be as complex as you want it to be, or it can be as simple. I personally like a simple waste strategy, 2 to 3 pages. Give yourself a nice little hierarchy. Help make it a checklist if you like, but focus on where are the facilities that my waste goes to? How does that impact what I should and shouldn't focus on? How do I consume and procure? Who are the suppliers I buy from? I had a conversation with my husband recently about sustainable piggeries. He works for a food brand. They sell a lot of bacon. And I got to tell you, there ain't nothing ethical or sustainable about piggeries I've now found in Australia. But look at those things. What do you regularly consume, and how can you make better choices that support better climate outcomes, better packaging outcomes, better waste outcomes for your organisation, while still being commercially suitable for your business? Because obviously we've all got to make money. And then finally, look at the opportunities that you have around you in your building. You'd be amazed if you're in a corporate office park, if you're in a retail centre, you'd be amazed at the opportunities you can find by collaborating with your neighbours. I've seen some really great initiatives in shopping centres that have actually come because 3 or 4 tenancies have banded together and said, you know what? We're sick of this particular waste problem. We want to solve for the cardboard boxes. We want to solve for the bottles. Partner with a charity program for your bottles, those sorts of things. So I'd suggest, while nothing I'm saying is revolutionary today, it actually doesn't need to be. Often starting with waste opportunities for your business and progressing down a path of, whether it's towards zero waste or whether it's towards more effective sustainability or climate outcomes, just dive in. Give yourself a checklist of the things you can control. Put a couple of initiatives in place and see how they roll. And don't forget to chat to your team, because you'll be amazed at the mindset and the ideas that come from staff. I know I'd say 80% of the amazing ideas that come from our business come from the team, and the other 20% probably come from our clients. And I'm the wrangler of the amazing ideas. That's it. So once you've got some programs in place, Catherine mentioned before the importance of measuring. Measuring isn't going to be perfect. So I would always suggest put your programs in place, have a bit of a small strategy. And once you've done that, from a measurement perspective in the waste sector, we talk about tons of kilos. We like to weigh everything, love weighing stuff. However, that's not realistic in a business that's not in that sector often. Consider instead focusing on triple bottom line reporting, people, planet, profit. So we want to focus on what are the impacts from a sustainability perspective on my commercial business. So how does it affect my dollars? What's my P&L do? We want to measure planetary impact. So that might be that you decide, what, I am going to weigh in kilos, or I'm going to ask the people that pick up my bins if I have a commercial service every month when they send me my invoice to send me reports with my tons so I can feed them into my climate calculators and calculate my carbon impact. It might be that you simply start to take a tally of the utilization of how frequently your services and your programs are being used by your staff or by the customers who come to your sites or your stores. Define your own metric and start there. I love to say that there is a perfect outcome for everybody to easily measure their impact and reduction. There are some great programs. There's a program called ROY, ROOY, which actually is focused on measuring impact. However, it's much bigger picture. It's very expensive. Start small. As your business grows, or as you feel the need for what you have grows, so that you can actually report to shareholders or you can report for marketing purposes, just make sure the information you have is real. That's the most important thing. Measurable, real, and authentic. So once we do all that, how do we know that all the data that we've collated isn't rubbish? Well, if you choose a methodology that suits you and suits your business, and you are consistent every month in measuring, whether it's kilos, number of bins, number of loads of bottles that we've donated to the local scouts, you'll start to see a trend build up. Just keep consistently to that trend. Every 3 months, go back and reassess. Is there something you've missed? Add a new measurement. As long as you stay consistent, your data will not be rubbish. Your data will be fine. And as you grow, you can start to actually engage with third-party contractors to see if they've got any opportunities, because what you'll find really interesting is that the Cleanaways of the world and the Remondises of the world and the Veolias of the world, those big players in the waste space, often have really great resources, which you can also grab from their websites. And don't forget Planet Arc. Planet Arc has amazing resources online as well. So that's it from me. I know I put a slide up that says any questions, but I know not taking questions just yet. I'll leave that, just ignore me. I've probably been a little fast. I don't know, we'll see, maybe I ran over, but that's it for me. And if you do have any questions, I'll get to them when Lauren tells me to answer them.
Thank you so much for all your valuable information and sharing that with everyone this morning, Lacey. I'm now going to introduce you to our quick fire round with Catherine, Lacey and May. So I'm going to start with May. So May runs the Somersault Markets. They've been going since 2016 here in Perth. I want to ask this morning, how do you go about setting up sustainable events? For instance, did you start with criteria and the impacts you were looking to make? And how did you go about making a plan?
Thanks, Carbon Positive team, for having me today. Lacey, that was a really insightful presentation. So yeah, firstly, so how do we go about starting a sustainable event? Well, it's very overwhelming to begin with. So firstly, just break it down into small bite-sized pieces. Don't get too overwhelmed with, everything and everyone that's going around, things that are going around you. Just focus on what you can do. So, we've been going for 8 years now. We started off with a simple mug library where people could borrow, coffee cups from a little tent that we had volunteers at. Just small, simple ideas that can have a drastic change are really the easiest things that you can focus on. So from then on, we went on to water filter stations, and then also going on to now reusable packaging system where food trucks and coffee carts use a reusable system called Go-To Cups. So they're an amazing WA organisation where they hire out plates, cutleries and cups to events. And it's just incredible to see that, you know, these organisations have these services on offer now, but, you know, we didn't have that 8 years ago. So yeah, I would say small bite-sized pieces, and focus in your lane. Don't get too overwhelmed. Definitely reach out to aligned organisations where you can partner with or collaborate with. We collaborate with Tangaroa Blue, an organisation who focus on beach cleanups. You know, you can have impact together. It can be very lonely to do things yourself. You know, it can get really timely and costly as well to do those things. So definitely I find reaching out to organizations that have similar values to you. You know, they've got a fantastic team that are values aligned, definitely helps you to push forwards with your purpose-driven projects. And yeah, thirdly, I would say, you know, gather your resources, and reach out to the community as well. There are so many fantastic resources within the community that, you know, you can really work with, and definitely create those partnerships. So we have a fantastic partnership with the local school, St. Mary's, where the students actually come down and assist at the mug library and the event in order to gain their community service hours. So yeah, as much as we talk about, you know, environmental sustainability events, we also talk about community sustainability, educating and inspiring those younger leaders that are coming through. And yeah, sorry, I missed the second part of the question. I was just going on a tangent.
That's all right. That's awesome. How did you go about making a plan when you were starting out?
Yeah, so sitting down with a sustainability consultant, there's so many elements within the market space and events. You know, you've got your storeholders businesses, you've got marketing, you have sustainability, you've got council policies, regulations. It's just, you know, it's a huge wide world. So yeah, we sat down with a sustainability consultant, made a clear plan, and each year our goal was to have, you know, one goal that we could push through and really focus on that one goal, and breaking that down into smaller steps. So I would say, yeah, definitely reach out to the specialists, talk to the people that know what they're doing, and then, yeah, make that happen together over a course of a time.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that with everyone this morning. Next question this morning is for you, Lacey. What changes do you think the waste industry needs to make?
Look, I think we need to find ways to continue to ensure that we've got investment in remanufacture, because at the end of the day, recycling is a business, it's a commercial opportunity, but the challenge we have and some of the program failures that we've seen recently have come from either a lack of regulator support and, you know, signing off on approvals fast enough, or also from a lack of investment in remanufacture opportunities. No one's going to buy the bottle of Coca-Cola that cost them $18 just for the glass bottle because the production cost was so high. So finding ways for government to reinvest. I think there's opportunities for stewardship programs to be heavily involved in that. You know, there's discussions at the moment about reinvesting in mattress programs so that every mattress, the tariff is going back into remanufacture. Those are great outcomes, but it's not going to happen unless it's mandated. So I think for our sector, we really need to continue to support government to push an agenda to ensure that we have capacity to be able to remanufacture and recycle more effectively. And in regions where most of the people don't live, because there's an awful lot of waste that sits in far north Queensland, far north WA, you know, those sorts of spaces. We really need to find some solutions up there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next up is a question for Catherine. How can a company make the biggest reduction, to their footprint?
What's it? I think, as we've already discussed, it is really specific to the business or the industry that you're in. I think what I'm finding when I chat to a lot of organizations, they get overwhelmed with information. They don't know where to start, so they don't do anything. So probably the biggest impact you can have is actually by just making a size, like as Maywan said, and Lacey, just start somewhere, start simple with what you can do. You've already started making a reduction, that's it. I also want to say, like, sustainability is, in some ways having an ideology, isn't it? Like, if you can incorporate that into your workplace, help create education for your staff, have a bit of a, create a policy with some simple steps, that is a really great way to start. And then you can continue to build on that. And as I said, until you start measuring, you can't really truly see what where your biggest reductions are going to be, because it's very individual for each organization.
Okay, so the next question is for Maywan. What pain points have happened, or have they been in your sustainability journey?
Pain points, I would say, coming back to Lacey's point again, definitely council has caused some challenges, mixed messages, things that are costly. So prepare, plan, and make sure you have, clear communication channels with council, and just push through, just continue pushing through until you get the result that you want.
Perfect. And Lacey, for yourself, what does sustainability look like for your business?
For my business, so we look at sustainability on a number of spaces, I suppose. We align to the UN SDG goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. So for us, we're looking for sustainability of employment for the humans that we employ. We're also looking for ongoing commitment to our business to actually grow so that we can keep those jobs. But then when we look at, I suppose, the more broad environmental sustainability, we're really looking at small scale programs that we can implement that are easy for a remote team, because my team of 11 are based all over Australia, sometimes at home in co-working spaces. So we really look for partnership opportunities. If we're in a building, it has recycling programs. If we're renting in a co-working space, they share our ethos. They have kitchen gardens. They maybe have programs where they send their coffee beans back for recycling. And we like to partner with all the kids in our broader network for our bottles and things like that. So we're very much small scale, easy to deliver programs, but we also ensure that anybody that we partner with or we collaborate with shares those values as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'd like to take a moment just to thank all three of you for your time with the panel this morning. We're now going to open the floor to some questions. So I'll take a look here and see what questions our participants have asked, and we'll see if we can get through a few of them. We may not be able to get through all of them. So, okay, let's start with this one here. Someone has asked, hi there, are these emission factors universal for Australia? So that would come off the back of Catherine's discussion. So over to...
Sorry. Can you hear me? Or am I still on mute? Yeah, can you hear me? Great. Yes, they are universal for Australia. So as I said, the Department of Energy, Water and something else published the emissions factors. They're universal for Australia. But then, sorry, I'm just to say not completely universal, because like each state has different emission factors for energy. For somewhere like Adelaide has a lot of renewable energy. So if you're working off that grid, the emissions factors are lower. So, but like on our own calculator, it takes into account which grid you're working from. If emission factors are not available, there's not the data here in Australia, you tend to look to similar countries and their emission factors, like perhaps UK, where the data is not available here.
Thanks, Kath. So this question's for May Wan. One of the attendees has asked, what was the community response like each time you introduced or launched a new sustainability measure?
Community response was very positive. People were happy to see that we were making change and leading the way and inspiring other events and consumer behavior. You do always get, maybe like the 5-10% of people that might not understand or might not be on board at the beginning, but slowly and surely over time, I feel like, they jump on board. They're all about, the new water filter stations, bringing their own bottles down and bringing their own cups down. It just takes some time. So overall, very positive.
Thank you. Lacey, I think I'll throw this one over to you. Matthew has asked, I work in New South Wales Health. I'm a small cog in a huge machine. How can I best influence a large organisation to move towards sustainability?
Look, I'd say, Matthew, being a small cog is actually not a bad thing. Sometimes the squeaky wheel makes the most noise. I would suggest finding the right people at the right level who you work with regularly to start influencing and make the small change. A great example, Queensland Health had a team member. She was a radiologist who decided to start collecting plastics and putting them into a recycling program. She's recently sourced $500,000 for her hospital to put in place an entirely new resource recovery program hospital-wide, and Queensland Health is looking to replicate that across the state. Now, that's one person who just happened to work in the hospital. So I think anywhere in a broader organisation, find a small way to demonstrate that the change can be effective, and then start to talk about it. It's marketing, promote it. And if you need some resources to look at other examples of that, I'm happy to share some examples with the team of how other large organisations have started from a small single human in the team.
Thank you so much. Kath, another one for you comes from Lisa. She says, I'm a small business with a home office employing many freelance contractors who also mostly work from home. How do I measure and manage that holistically? Or can I only ever really be responsible for my home office?
Sorry, I'm not very coordinated. I'm like getting the sound back off. So in terms of that, you can take responsibility for your staff's footprint. I mean, we've done an average footprint per annum for an office worker, and that's like their water, electricity, and energy consumption. The average, I mean, I guess as we sort of found, there's not much variance. So one thing I guess people don't always know about carbon footprints is once you've sort of put in the figures a few times, you see what actually causes like higher rises in emissions, and it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not that much. So I guess where you are, Lisa, I would just take an average, which I think it ends up being about 1.5 tonnes or something like that per employee per annum in their office. If they weren't full-time, you could just pro rata that. I'd probably say, as I said, you could go through everyone going through their own energy and water audit, but you probably find that the changes are not that great. So it's probably not worth factoring in. Oh, I was just going to say, because I'm sorry when I got the floor, as again, taking over. I'd go to Lacey's point as well. I think where I've had experience of that in work as well, I've also found, my allies, like it doesn't, it's great to talk to people above and who might be sympathetic to hearing things, but also just finding out who is interested in that area as well. And if you can form a bit of a group together to, as Lacey said, take an action and demonstrate it, can also be a great way, because I think you probably will find you have allies within your organization.
And another question for you, Kath. An anonymous attendee has asked, some companies charge a carbon offset fee, for example, airlines, etc. Can you explain how paying these dollars converts to physically offsetting emissions? Who collects those fees and how are they used?
Yeah, I can. So look, I don't unfortunately know the full process through the airlines. They don't actually give great information, but I guess what I'm trying to say, like in my section about carbon offset projects, different offset projects, you're buying a unit in that carbon offset project. That's what a carbon offset is. Different projects have different prices. So generally, the better quality the project, the higher the price of the carbon offset. So what would be a better quality project? I mean, something that's, delivering greater social and economical benefits, although we're not really measuring it on an economical sense yet. It, people do put a value on that. So in the case of the airlines, they're not giving great information on where they're buying the offsets, but I would say at the price they charge, it would probably be quite a low cost project, probably a renewables in another country. So I think, yes, it's definitely reducing carbon. I'm just sort of saying it. I would say it's probably not one of the best environmental projects that you could invest in. And do I know exactly where that money's going? No, I don't, because they don't, the airlines don't get great information on that. But I do have some faith in that they are actually offsetting the carbon.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So that's all the questions we have time for today. For those we have been able to answer, we'll get back to you directly. Again, a huge thank you to yourself, Kath, Lacey and Maywan, and for all of you who have joined us this morning to take time out of your days to learn a bit more. Stay tuned for an email from our team following this morning's event.